I am Inka Larissa.
And I am Jennifer Rose.
Whisky Sisters, the podcast.
We are two whiskey pals serving a weekly whiskey podcast and rocking your whiskey world.
Exploring the whiskies and distilleries of the world and meeting amazing people along the way.
We'll be sticking our noses into our drams and all things whiskey.
So fill your whiskey glass and join the fun.
You're listening to Whisky Sisters, the podcast.
Today's episode was supposed to be all about water. You know, everyone's been waiting for this moment for us adding water in our whiskeys, but unfortunately, we've had some delivery issues. Boo! So we will cover this topic next week.
Keeping people guessing and keeping it rock and roll.
Yeah, keeping it on your toes.
Today we are focusing on new make spirit, and we have our first Whisky Sister Whisky Pal on as well. Oh, drum rolls aplenty. But first, of course, we'll be sticking our noses into that latest whiskey news.
Stick your nose in it.
When I was checking for the news for today's episode, there's not been much happening in the whiskey world, I have to say. Some new releases, some auction, usual money-making releases from back in the day, whatnot. But
do you think it's because it's sunny in Scotland? People have just downed tools and they're not releasing any information.
Yeah, nothing is happening. Everyone's going mental because it's way too hot in Scotland.
That's it. Taps off.
Yeah.
For those not in the know, taps off is the Scottish way of saying tops off, because a lot of people decide to take their top off as soon as there's any glimpse of sun, don't they?
Yes. Oh, it's funny. So I came across a recent article for a couple of days ago that was titled "The Link Between Whiskey and Men." Oh,
okay.
I have to say, this article was so outdated. I could not believe it. I wouldn't normally really focus on things like that because, we know that there's still some work to be done with the stereotypes of whiskey and obviously all these like hairy men drinking whiskey. But let me just read a few sentences because this was too good not to mention.
Okay, hit me with it.
If you take a moment and think about it, there is a link between whiskey and men. The two complement each other. Whiskey is a sophisticated drink with a sense of masculinity to it. It is rare to hear women say, "Hey ladies, let's go out for a whiskey night." However, men talk about whiskey a lot. If there's a group of men chilling, there is probably a bottle of whiskey around. Whiskey is honestly a man thing. It is more attractive to a man than it is to a woman to drink whiskey. If a woman is to drink whiskey, it's probably in a cocktail or some mixed drink. In all honesty, it is quite rare to find women drinking whiskey. Oh my God, I'm sorry.
Wow. So this is a recent article.
Yes, this is a recent article. Oh my God.
What country was it released in?
It's a Namibian magazine or newspaper or whatever.
Okay.
Maybe still work to be done, but come on. Like, it's crazy. So, and then he goes on giving some advice on how to drink whiskey.
Okay.
And what he'll be drinking at a upcoming whiskey festival. Here are some tips. Please refrain from mixing it. By doing so, you will alter its taste. You will bury the flavor, and the effort that went into making of it would have gone to waste. If you're drinking it and it has burning sensation, it's probably shit. Add ice or water to keep the original taste. What? Original taste? Come on. Oh, okay. And then FNB, which is the Namibian Whiskey Festival, is tomorrow. I believe there will be more men than women. I will probably go, not sure yet. But if I do, I will have a Macallan, a Glenlivet, or Glenfiddich. Something a bit premium.
Oh, well, he is just putting those opinions out there.
I know. It's
Super
just like
gallus.
Makes me think of like really the whole like concept of mansplaining. Like it's like, oh, I know everything about whiskey and women don't know how to drink whiskey. And then he's like, yeah, I'll have a Macallan 10-year-old, please.
I want to know, did he go to the whiskey festival? Did he meet some amazing whiskey loving ladies there and have a chat to them and change his thoughts and opinions? It does seem like, it's from, I don't know, another decade.
Such a caveman attitude.
Do we have listeners in Namibia? We want to hear from you. What is the whiskey culture like? What do you think of this article? And any whiskey loving ladies, be letting us know. Whiskey distillery Glenglassaugh has released its latest campaign, Awaken the Senses, from creative agency Southpaw production company Irresistible Studios and director David J. East. Their project was inspired by the impact of land and sea, celebrating their contrasting yet complementary elements. It's a totally unique project with really beautiful cinematography and visual storytelling. And the finished scenic spot is set against a beautiful Scottish coastline, featuring harbour towns peppered with ocean breeze and accompanied by an ancient gentle spirit. Shots of rolling waves morph seamlessly into rippling whiskey, aromatic amber liquid into fragrant yellow flowers, showcasing how all nature's offerings are harnessed in a single Glenglassaugh bottle. Transport me there now. I'm there.
I know, right? I'm not always sure about all these marketing campaigns. They kind of, out there, and it's like, what's anything got to do with whiskey? But oh my God, they really brought this together with the new bottle design. And I don't know if this is the new bottles design or is it just for these releases. But it's beautiful. It's literally, have you seen it? It's like the waves on the top of the bottle.
Yeah.
It's just really, really nice.
I am super sold by their marketing campaign. I'm considering myself enchanted.
Yes, absolutely. Me too. Did you watched Succession, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Fuck off.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Big fan of Logan Roy, main character.
Yes.
Played by Brian Cox.
So Brian Cox, just recently on a magazine interview, and they did this like a video, he said that his favorite whiskey is RBK Highland Rye, which we just featured on the pod. Yeah.
That is so cool. I wish we had him on our episode to chat all about it with us. How cool would that have been?
That would have been really cool. But I think he's a cool guy anyway. And of course, he's just not going to choose any whiskey. And he's just going like totally rogue, RBK Highland Rye.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good stuff.
How are you up to date with the show Succession?
Yes. Yeah.
So I think we should talk about it and just put out a spoiler alert. Is that okay?
Yeah. Well, it's finished a little while, so hopefully everyone's watched it anyway.
Exactly. So everybody that loves Succession has probably heard about this. But if you're like saving it for some reason and you haven't watched the latest season, then like fast forward for a bit. So people are raving about it.
Yeah.
I'm annoyed.
Why? Why are you annoyed? I'm annoyed a little bit as well, but I want to hear why you're annoyed.
I'm so annoyed. So I was like super excited. Like I'm a massive fan of the show, and Brian Cox, oh, fuck off. The whole thing. He fricking died.
Yeah, way too early. Way too early. Yeah.
Crappy death scene. There was no big theatrical death scene.
Mm-hmm.
I feel cheated from Logan's presence on the show. And I took a huff and I stopped watching it after that episode, and I refused to watch the rest.
No.
I'm out.
God, you still have to. Okay, that episode was annoying, and then the next episode was kind of like, and then it kind of got better. So I do think you should still watch it.
I'm still in like a bad mood about it, but who knows? I might go back to
it. But originally they were going to kill his character at the beginning of the show, like literally on the first episode.
That's a crime, isn't it? To have killed him then.
I know, but they really liked him and the stuff, and they kept him on. But even on that interview, actually, on the same interview that he says he likes RBK, he did comment on that and said, I would not have done that to kill the main character so early, because it kind of ruins you lose the momentum or the kind of tension of the show.
Yeah, for sure.
It's, a lot of it's down to the writers and directors and stuff. And as an actor, you can't really have much to say on it.
That's very cool that he is into RBK. And we've mentioned on the podcast before, but there are apparently plans for him to be the kind of star in a movie about a whole whiskey story set in Scotland, and we would love to get involved and hear a bit more about that, maybe get him or people connected with that epic project on the podcast. So if you can get us involved, listeners, hook us up.
Also, the interview he did for the new Barley magazine, which is a new magazine about not just whiskey but a lot of other things, but I think it's quite heavily whiskey related. The interview is really good. I recommend you read it. He was very quite opinionated person and loads of stuff to say. So have a look.
Cool.
Whiskey Sisters, the podcast.
Before there is single malt, there's new make spirit. New make spirit is clear, colorless spirit that comes off the still after distillation. Every time the spirit is distilled, it becomes stronger in character, and the average strength after double distillation is about 70% ABV. And after triple distillation, the spirit is closer to 80% ABV. This also has an impact on the flavor. The stronger the spirit, the lighter its aromatic characters will be. And if you think of peated whiskies, which I love, so for example, the peat flavor comes from the new make. That is from the original distillate. So it's that strong.
Yeah.
Imagine, because some people are, not really sure whether new make makes difference or whether you can taste those characters. So at least peat, you will definitely get through that. And many distillers are selling small bottles of their new makes or are even including the new make in the tasting sessions. And I think this kind of helps include the consumers as part of the production and the maturation process and the kind of whole journey of the whiskey, how it evolves. It gives us basically an idea of the style of the whiskey we can expect from this distillery. So call it maybe a DNA of distillery, basically. It really gives you a good idea of how the whiskey will be.
Absolutely. And there are other things that also contribute to the flavours of the new make, such as the length of fermentation. Then there's reflux, where the distiller makes their cut points, and also vitally important in creating a spirit that is light and smooth. So to create lighter new make spirit in the first place, the distiller needs to increase the amount of reflux in the still to remove unwanted compounds and maintain a tight control over cut points. Reflux can be increased with the use of large stills, as well as additional features such as balls. Spit out, Jen. Balls, boil balls, and upward line arms. The bigger the surface area and more difficult it is for the vapour to travel into the condenser, the greater the reflux will be.
Basically, buying a new make from a distillery, can give you a good insight into the flavour profile of this distillery. And especially this is true to distilleries who have a lot of different cask finishes. So you can compare side by side, between the new make and some of the other expressions and really I don't know. For me, it just always makes so much more sense. And it's like building blocks, kind of, you can understand the characters of this distillery and the whiskey much better. So, for example, recently when we visited Loch Lomond, they have straight neck pot stills, which can produce spirit up to 90% ABV, and where their swan neck stills can deliver around the 70% ABV. So the range of alcohol strengths help capturing different flavors throughout the distillation. Obviously, these will both contribute to different flavors and levels of depth. By using two types of stills, different cut points, and peated and unpeated barley, the distiller is able to create 9 different single malt styles, which is incredible.
Count them, 9. Oh, we've chatted about this before, haven't we? We need to talk about trying the new makes at that distillery, don't we?
I tried quite a few of the new makes from different types of stills, and it was crazy. And it does make sense, though. They were kind of fruity, or sugary, orchard fruity. It does make sense when you think about Loch Lomond, that is the starting point.
Totally. And what really struck me was how different they were and how you could tell, that they had been produced differently, because some were maybe a wee bit fruitier, others were maybe a wee bit more kind of floral perfumed. And I just thought it was a good example of how important new make is when I was tasting them.
Absolutely. And it obviously makes it easier at Loch Lomond because they have the different types of stills, so you have even more to compare to. Yeah, it was very intriguing. Although after you tried some of new makes and then you start trying the whiskey, it's like, whoa, quite a few fumes all over the place.
Totally.
Towards the end of the tasting, it's like, what am I even tasting?
Where am I? See, when you first, can I just ask, Inka, see, before you'd ever tried new make, were you excited or keen to try it? Because I was a bit scared to try it.
No, I think I've always kind of been intrigued by it. I never really thought too much of it, to be fair. I always kind of thought that it helps you understand the whiskey better. It's just like I felt like the description of the DNA of the distillery. I think it really helps you with that.
I really like that.
I had drinks with someone just recently, and they were saying like, oh, quite new to whiskey, and was like doing a tasting, and at the tasting they were giving the new make, and she's like, oh, why are they giving me this new make? I don't want to try this. I want to try the whiskey. Like, it's too harsh, it's too much, too strong. But then maybe if you're a new whiskey drinker, it can scare you off a little bit, because obviously the ABV is higher, and I don't think it should be that harsh anyway. I think a lot of times, maybe because it's clear spirit, people are a little bit scared of it. But
maybe that's what it is, you know, maybe because it's clear spirit. And I was maybe thinking like white spirits, the stuff that you take paint off with. I think I was kind of imagining it might be like that.
Yeah, paint streamer. Even if you think of the nose, normally the aromas are the ones that come off like really strong.
Yeah.
But also on the palate, you normally do tend to get kind of softer,
definitely,
fruity flavors. Obviously, there's different types of whiskeys. Some of them are a bit meatier. Some of them, you know, have the peat and all that kind of stuff. But although I don't remember ever having a super peated new make. Might be quite harsh because they don't normally offer it. I don't remember trying any.
It makes me think of the chocolate truffles made by Lag Distillery new make, that, you know, peated whiskey from Lag, and I think those truffles were epic.
Oh, they were so good. And we were eating those with the cask sample of Lag, and that worked out.
Just became whiskey, so it was kind of, you know, just past its new make stage.
Oh, that was delicious.
So good.
I guess you can't talk about new makes without talking about Waterford and Terroir, which we also featured before. Any of our new listeners, go and check out that episode. The Waterford distillery clearly wants to demonstrate that terroir exists in spirits, and especially, you know, whiskey. And the early indications were quite positive. When I visited the distillery, I tried new makes in Ned's little hut. I don't know what you call it, a little room of loads of new makes, and it was really fun. And we were comparing all the different new makes, and he wasn't telling me any information of the farms or anything else. It's just like, okay, try this. What do you think about this? Try that. What do you think about this? And it was really clear that some of the ones that then turned out to be organic, for example, I found them much fruitier in flavor compared to then the ones that later on they told me that were just more conventionally grown barley. And the biodynamic was kind of juicier and even more sweeter. Like, it was really, I guess you would say elevated, or it's just like felt more stronger, like more complex almost, maybe.
Yeah, and those differences evident at that early stage.
Yeah, exactly. And I could like clearly identify some saltiness in one of the batches, which then Ned told me that it was from one of the farms that is like super close to the beach, and there's like massive winds and the sea water is constantly going in the farm. They had like maybe someone's a bit more floral, malty, grassy, oily, you know, different tasting notes that you then get in the whiskey, but super interesting.
Definitely. And do you think there are parallels, you know, like in cooking, some chefs will say like you must have like the best quality ingredients and they'll use their skill, but you have to do less with those, you know, if the quality of the produce is good. But I guess you can have like juicy food that's maybe not that good quality, but they've put like loads of like dodgy stuff in it. Well, and you know, like you might think, oh, that's juicy and nice, but it's different to that lovely qualitative produce.
Exactly. I think obviously like Italy is called as the garden of Europe. So we have loads of fruits and vegetables and herbs and things that are growing. Yeah. Everyone is always raving about the tomatoes, for example. But even in Italy, if you buy tomatoes in the supermarket, they taste not as good as the ones that you buy from the local market. Yeah. And the ones from the local market, they probably last for like 2 days before they start getting all stocky and stuff. And again, I'm sure a lot of it goes with, you know, organic farming methods and different things like using pesticides and so on, which also comes down to the barley and so on. Arbiki as well, like we mentioned just recently, they are super into their terroir. And going back to the vodkas, even in the mouthfeel is clear that they are using different types of maybe distillation methods, but also the produce is super, super tasty.
Brilliant. And I also came across Highland Park selling their new make. which is inspired by the original Orcadian whiskey distilled under moonlight by the original founder Magnus Unsson in 1798. And they call the new make spirit Fungalskin from the Old Norse words for moon and light. They've added spring water to release subtle layers of flavour for a more palatable 50% ABV spirit, and it's said to be delicious with blood orange juice. And I'm quite intrigued by that. I really like the flavour of blood orange, but I've
Me
not tried it.
too.
Have you?
No, I haven't tried it, but I love blood orange in lots of long drinks or cocktails, especially like freshly squeezed. So good. And sometimes I actually eat half a blood orange in the morning.
Nice.
So good. Now that you mentioned the blood orange anyway, so let's talk about a little bit about new make in drinks. Some people think like, oh, a new make is kind of like similar to vodka or, gin. Kind of is not. Like it's a clear spirit, but obviously it's different and it's made with different ingredients and it's not quite the same. But there's been quite a trend recently, I think, that new makes are making into cocktails in bars. And have you tried any?
Do you know, I haven't tried any, but we have got a cunning plan, haven't we, to try Glencaddam new make in pina coladas, but we haven't done it yet because we've not been poolside or beachside together
I know.
Since we got the new make. So if we're going to do something, we're going to do it right. So I feel a little bit impatient. We're impatiently waiting to get that opportunity to try it because it's apparently super tasty in a pina colada. And we can dance in the rain. Do you like a pina colada, Inka?
You know what? I like it, but loads of places and bars make it super gross and do cream and needs to be,
like it can be quite synthetic, but I really love like the kind of freshly, nicely done pina colada.
Exactly. Fresh pineapple juice, fresh coconut, the whole shebang. I was in Cuba some years ago and they made amazing pina coladas at this one place. It's just a small little town and just couldn't get enough. It was so good.
Well, Inka, I don't want to mess it up. So maybe you, as you're on the sauce again, for new listeners, check out her alter ego and blog. She's like kind of famous in that world and it's very interesting. But you can take the helm and make us the pina coladas.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's do it. We'll do a little reel or something.
And Glencaddam's new make is said to have floral notes and pear, which is a direct result of a distillation regime that maximizes reflux. The linarm on the stills are angled upwards, meaning it will contribute to delicacy and lightness in the spirit. So we're very lucky to have a sample of that.
Dram on fire.
Lindores Abbey Distillery is selling both their new make and aquavitae. It's all about the tradition of whiskey making. And one of our earliest episodes is all about Lindores Abbey. And we have a chat with Helen Mackenzie Smith, who was just such an amazing guest and also host when Inka and I recently visited the distillery together, which was lovely. Lindores new make single malt spirit is made using local barley that grows on the fields next to the distillery. The variety is Laureate. They use local water from a 90-metre borehole. 90 metres down, that is.
They do 5 mashes a week and they work with combination of 2 short and 3 long fermentations. And the short fermentation is 68 hours long and the other one is 114 hours. The point of this is to get the perfect aromatic, mellow and very fruity character with some floral notes. And the first distillation takes place in a 10,000 litre copper pot wash still. And for the second distillation, they use 2 smaller sister stills with capacity of 3,500 litres each. This gives more copper contact, and by this way, the outcome is said to be lighter and fruitier new make. So let's see if we can detect those fruity notes or floral notes.
Just out of habit, I want to see the colour.
Yeah,
it is clear.
The colour, clear. Definitely fruity nose, right?
For sure. For me, kind of mashed banana and pureed fruits, almost.
Oh my God.
So much now. I found it quite fermented on first nose.
Yeah, me too. Definitely needed some time in the glass. But obviously this is, let's see, 63.5% ABV. So it's obviously quite punchy at first. Not like harsh. I don't think it's super harsh, but I mean, it needs just a little bit air to detect those notes.
I got a little bit of compost on the nose. I think maybe thinking of like outdoor smells and like
Oh my God.
fermentation.
I was literally just going to say, when you said mushy stuff, I was going to say, it kind of smells like my compost outside. Or like, you know, like I have like a tiny little container for food waste. In Italy, you have to like recycle everything. So got tiny little food waste and got some extra ripe bananas in there and a bit of peach and things just all like in the heat, just kind of getting together.
Kind of like not horrible, but totally funky.
Something kind of barley, woody, something in the background, like sticks.
I agree. Do you know what I've written to try and describe that? I don't know if you ever eat them. They're like these sesame seed and honey bars. They're kind of like weird and hard, and they're made with all sesame seeds, and they smell kind of like dusty.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I kind of got the aroma of them when I went in
Yeah, I
earlier.
like the dustiness as well. Like, it's not really dusty, but when you like, if you cut it, like crunch it, that kind of dusty that comes from the bar.
Yeah. Yes. I can't work out if I like those bars or not yet.
Yeah.
Kind of like a little bit.
Yeah. I know, they stick on your teeth a little bit as well, don't they?
Yeah, definitely.
So actually, Lindores Abbey New Make was voted the best new make in Scotland by prestigious World Whiskies Award in 2020.
Well done, Lindores. That's quite the big deal.
So how about the palate? What are you getting?
I found it more pleasant on the palate than I was anticipating, just, on first nosing, just maybe because I was getting that slightly fermented and compostiness in the nose. But on the palate, I got nice orchard fruits, more like pear and apple, and maybe even some like sour berries, like blackberries.
Yeah, and there's definitely spiciness as well.
Yeah.
Like, like white pepper or something like that. It's kind of warming.
Definitely. That's such a good shout.
Maybe some cloves.
Oh, yeah, that's good. Definitely. I kind of like ignored the spice for some reason. And I don't know if I'm getting it now, but I earlier was getting like a faint marzipan.
Yeah, I think I get that now that you mentioned it, also in the nose a little bit.
Did you get anything else on the palate, Inka?
On the finish, there's definitely some oakiness as well, like kind of woodiness. I find it weird drinking new makes because it is so much stronger.
Yeah.
I actually haven't tried any. I might just add a little bit of water in this and see how
dun. Okay, I'm going to do the same. I'll pour it from my water bottle.
I think the nose is very similar.
Yeah, maybe it's a tiny bit sweeter.
It's funny. I don't understand the water. It's just everything always becomes more spicier for me.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't like spicier. See, it's let us down again.
I know. It's just saw your face on camera. Trying it afterwards, just like, nah.
Like a little kid. A little kid.
Funny that, isn't it?
Definitely. And I found the finish quite lingering. And I also get some, like dough if you're making bread.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's a bit bready. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the ways also to try new make, if you are at the distillery, or like sometimes they give you like a little, when they taking the cut of the still, you can put a little bit on your palm of your hands and then rub your hands together like, sanitizer, and then smell your hand. And it really tells you a lot of the new make. You already get the aromas. You should get the fruitiness or whatever there is going on. I
love that top tip. Slather it on the hands. Get busy. Do you think there's, if you're caught somewhere with whiskey, I'm just thinking that we're heading to a rock concert soon. Do you think we could say it's just for sanitizing our hands?
Yeah. Oh my God, that's another level smuggling in.
Exactly. I'm not going to do that, right? But as we've said before, we need to assess whether we are sold some good whiskey at the next outdoor gig we're at, because we're often incredibly let down.
We did a little poll recently on social media just to see what people think about new make.
We did. We're practically researchers now.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't quite say Dr. Inka and Dr. Jen after the research on Instagram stories, but hey,
Yeah, so we were asking what people think about new make, whether it makes any difference or, how important is it? So 73% said there's a big impact on flavors. 3% said it doesn't matter because it changes in the cask. Gasp.
Dun, dun.
And 22% said there's some importance, and 2% said not sure. And this actually makes me think about that fact. I think I've mentioned this before in the podcast, but when someone sent me a new make sample some years ago, because they were waiting to make their whiskey, and just asked my opinion, my humble opinion, and I never wanted to go back and reply because it was really bad.
You were not impressed.
I was not. The new make really tasted like bad tequila. It was just really gross.
Yeah.
And eventually this person contacts me and like, do you have anything feedback? So I thought, okay, I'm just going to be my Finnish self and just lay it on the table and say how it is. So I said, I'm really sorry, but I really didn't like it. It tasted like bad tequila. It's just like, it wasn't working for me. So I wasn't into it. So he then goes and saying, well, it doesn't matter really because all the flavor comes from the casks.
But that's fascinating in itself, isn't it? Because why be interested in your opinion on it if that was his belief?
Exactly. And I just think, whiskey making is very expensive. And you have to pay a lot of money before the whiskey is actually ready with all the casks, distilling, all the equipment, everything. So why would you take the risk of putting something crap inside the cask and hoping for the best that the cask will... So this whiskey is now available. I haven't received any samples.
And you won't be getting asked for your opinion again.
I know, and I haven't tried it, but I think I should probably try to source some and just try it and see if I was wrong.
Yeah, whether you're going to eat your words and it's a tasty dram. And I guess we've maybe had whiskies that we've enjoyed, and for all we know, the new make might taste kind of like not so good. In my opinion, new make matters.
Did a little question if people have been trying new makes. So quite a few people, like 90% of the repliers, have tried some new makes. So that's really good. But there are some people who never tried it or would like to. So hopefully this episode will encourage you to source some, or when you're at the distillery, ask.
Definitely. And we'd love to hear any cocktail recipes or any thoughts that you have on what you've tried.
Whisky Sisters Whisky Pals.
So for our regular listeners, you'll know that it's usually now time for our Whisky Fact, although, whoa, mixing it up a bit, being a little bit crazy because we have a new section that we're going to introduce now and again. Very exciting, isn't it, Inka?
Yeah, I feel like this episode is already like, oh, we changed the topic, keeping you on your toes. And now it's like, boom, Whisky Pals, new section. Yeah.
Because we feel incredibly lucky because we've met amazing people on our whiskey journey, and we thought it would be kind of cool to chat with them on the podcast.
Yeah, and let you, our listeners, discover new amazing whiskey people. There's so many different whiskey drinkers and everyone's in their different parts of their whiskey journey. So this is just bringing everyone together.
So we would like to warmly welcome Mike from Whiskey Morgue. Whiskey Morgue is his alter ego on the internet, and his page is all about whiskey and horror pairings, examining and draining bottles, and he's also a host of Horror on the Rocks on Rue Morgue TV.
Whiskey Morgue.
Okay, we would love to welcome Mike, the very first Whisky Sisters Whisky Pal. Welcome,
Woo-hoo.
Mike.
Thank you for having me. Being a first is very honorary, the reputation and guests that you've had on the show. So I'm excited to be here.
Like, full respect for the time distance, collaboration we've worked out here because you're in Canada.
It made me feel much cooler, like when I tell people what I'm doing this evening. I need to rush home because, I have to talk with my friends in Europe and hop on a podcast. So.
Inka and I know about Whiskey Morgue, but some of our listeners might not have come across your amazing work yet. So could you tell us, what is Whiskey Morgue and how it came about?
I guess in its simplest form, Whiskey Morgue is I have it in my bio, whiskey and horror pairings. Essentially, it came from having a large whiskey collection and then wanting to showcase it, but not wanting to just post simple pictures online. I kind of wanted to find my angle. And I actually for a year kind of wrestled with ideas. And finally, my wife was like, you always talk about you're going to one day have this Instagram account and you're going to maybe do a YouTube page and all this stuff. And you don't do anything. And that's very much me. I'll kind of rack my brain around something for forever. And finally she was like, why don't you just do what you know? Friday nights, you like putting on your horror movies and you pour a dram. So that's your thing. So I remember, I always say my boot camp was I got like that mini Funko Pop calendar of like the 13 days of different characters. And the agreement we made was that every day I'd open it up and on the spot have to do a post where I had to pair and make a connection between what I was drinking and the character from the movie. So we didn't have TV screens just yet, or I didn't know it would be necessarily that the horror movie would be in the background. And sure enough, the boot camp did me well. I feel like I kind of just like jumped into it. The TV thing kind of became its own, like it emerged slowly over time where I was like, this is easy to do. It's on in the background. Like I have my drink there. I was naive at the time, so I didn't know much about taking a proper photo or lighting. So figuring that out took some time. But yeah, I think like what it started off was, and I've kind of joked about this with you guys before, was like I wanted to start off as an ominous account, just posting whiskey and horror, and you don't know who I am, and
keeping the spooky feeling going.
Spooky, yes, like ominous. Who is this person? Like, you know, maybe one day I appear with a mask on. Only do interviews with masks. But then slowly it became more about like community. What Whiskey Morgue is now is not what I envisioned when I started. And I think that's what's a really cool thing about this, like being able to collaborate with you two, to be doing this where I'm hopping on your podcast. And it's like we all enjoy having a drink and watching TV or a movie, and we kind of bond over that. And I never wanted to be too serious. Like I enjoy tasting and chatting about whiskey, but most of the time I enjoy more of like the memories of meeting people and hanging out. And I feel like that's what it's really evolved into, is more about like the community aspect. Jen's always in the comments like, yeah, seen this one, or recommending something else. And it's great, right? It's like either you bond over a movie you both enjoyed, or, you know, you're like, hey, have you seen this? And I'm like, either no, or I haven't seen it in forever. And I'm like on my notepad, taking it down for a future idea. So it's great to do that.
I like how you say, like, you know, it's also about the memories, and maybe because you're watching certain film, having this whiskey with it, you will remember the whiskey in a different way, or it will bring you different types of memories.
Yeah, and I think that's always been a huge thing for me, is that like I think I'm really riding on a lot of nostalgia as well. So like the movie side of it, right away, I watched these movies when I was way too young. So like revisiting some of them, I have memories of like growing up and what that means to me. But then, like you said, the whiskey itself takes on a new meaning. This evening, I'm drinking some blackened Wes Henderson Masters series.
Yes!
And before this, right? And I know we're all fans. And I feel like before this would have just been like, cool, I love Metallica. Like I grew up listening to Metallica. So therefore, you know, I'm going to buy the whiskey and enjoy it. But having a pour of this and knowing that I've got to talk with both Wes and Rob, it's like every time I have a sip of this bottle, it means something more. So like you said, I guess attaching, whether it be the movie or the whiskey itself, is kind of creating these new memories through the experiences.
How cool is Rob? I love Rob. I'm actually sipping Ride the Lightning right now as well.
I love like every release, and I love that Rob is involved. Because I always joke that when Blackened came out, I was like, well, by default, I'm a Metallica fan, so I'm going to buy a bottle. But if it's really bad, it's going to be hard to like back it up and say like, yeah, I'm like a Metallica fan, it's awesome whiskey. And the way they went about it, I mean, they started with Dave Pickerel, but then with Rob going in there, and I was already a fan of what he was doing at Stranahan's, and then getting to like talk to him and know what he puts into it. There's such a great appreciation for it. And he's just so badass. Like, Rob is just the coolest guy.
And we need to thank Rob, because he told us about you and we bonded over that connection with Rob.
Is that really how it started?
Yeah, because we were recording with Rob and he mentioned you, and I was like, oh, and we were both like, well, we must check him out, and we connected and watched your live with Rob, and that's so cool. How it came about. So, you know, I've got Blackened Original in my glass as a little toast to that.
Yeah, we'll have a little toast to Rob here.
To Metallica and Blackened for life.
Yeah. And also you have your own Glencairn branded glassware. Love it.
That's a whole other venture that I didn't expect with doing this whole Whiskey Morgue thing. And I always joke that I'm like the face of the brand. I go on here, I get to have fun and hang out with you and have a drink and hang out. And it's my wife who's the creative, like behind the scenes, because she's like, we should do like a t-shirt. And I was like, yeah, cool. But then we got to design something and figure out how we're going to make them and pricing. And I'm like, that's beyond me right now. And next thing you know, I have like a prototype drawn up, So then I just get to sit here with like a cool t-shirt on and a glass. And I'm like, I'm a fan of my own merch because I didn't even create it.
I
my
love
wife.
that. Your wife sounds amazing. And for people that haven't seen the Whiskey Morgue merch, please check it out. Inka and I were speaking about this, like the tags on it, just the attention to detail. It is just giving everything. And
I can at least say that was my idea, the toe tags.
The toe tags.
I contributed something to the merch.
So we haven't had the joy of sampling the cask strength Black and Jet. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
So I wasn't too familiar with like white port finishes. The regular like Madeira finish, blackened, I'm familiar with. And I had Ride the Lightning, which is then what is the Madeira and the rum finish. And this one kind of completely out of left field. So when I first had it, it was like I remember smelling like bubble gum on the nose, mixed with like smoke, if that makes any sense. And the palate, like what was familiar with, I guess, like the Ride the Lightning, was a lot of honey, like a lot of like fruits. And I guess like even the standard expression has a lot of that, like the dried fruits, like apricot and whatnot. What really sells this one for me was like the oak, and there's a little bit of like a smokiness on the finish, like not, we're going into like peated Scotch territory, but there's like this hint of like charred oak and a little bit of smoke and like tobacco. And it's one of those pours that you kind of, you're chewing on for a bit. What's even cooler is that it's evolved. Sadly, I'm quite far. I got this like not too long ago, and I told myself I would preserve the bottle. And the problem is that it's just so good that I keep drinking it. I guess it's a good thing. But what was more cool about this? So the other week I was filming something with Rue Morgue, and it's really cool. We did like a flight of whiskeys, and I always open the bottles and share them. A lot of the people who were trying it weren't too familiar with whiskey. So I had like a Jack Daniel's single barrel. I think there was another Scotch involved, and there was some stuff off camera that we had. And people were kind of intrigued by the bottle to begin with. And they were like, oh, it looks so cool. Like, this is metallic. Like, is it really good? I get the question, like, it's like off camera, like, is it really good? And I'm like, no, it's amazing. And what was awesome is that non-whiskey drinkers, or people who don't really like collect or drink whiskey often, gravitated towards that pour and absolutely loved it. And I was like, that's really cool, because one person even said, oh, this has like so much flavor. And like I think they even mentioned you can like chew on it, but it's like smoother. And I know like smooth is like kind of becomes a blasphemous word, but I'm like, hey, funny enough, that's like 58% cask strength. And they're like, what? Really? Like Jack Daniel's is 40%. And they're like, why is this so good? It was cool for me being like a whiskey enthusiast who's like, yeah, this is amazing. And I'm sure if you two had it, you'd have such an appreciation and could like pick it apart. But a non-whiskey drinker having it and giving it that much praise, and non-whiskey drinkers like ranking what we had, and every single person was like, this was the pour of the day. That was really speaking volumes to how good the bottle is.
Now we definitely want some.
You know what? I got to figure it out. Like, there's enough here. I got to get like at least an ounce or two for each of you, and like international mail. Like, no, we'll make it happen. Like, for real, we'll.
Well, Blackened is actually now available, or we can order it to UK and Europe. Although I'm not sure, Italy is always so tricky. And I think it might, I don't know, is it just the classic?
It's just the classic one at the moment, Inka, but at least it's a step in the right direction.
Absolutely.
So we're super excited for that.
That's where Canada's at. When that bottle was released, I was like, I need to figure out a way to get it up here, because they just brought the standard expression here as well, but we don't have access the same way to like anything limited. Like Ride the Lightning, again, got it through the network of people, but otherwise I wouldn't be able to go to the store.
This showcases the need, everybody, to have Whiskey Pals, because that network of people across
There's the theme of the show, Whiskey Pals,
is essential.
Yeah.
Do you have favorite Canadian whiskeys? Because we don't really know much about Canadian whiskeys, but we were in the cover of a Canadian drink magazine, which was quite cool last year.
Yes, you were. Yes.
But
you're popular in Canada.
Yeah, I know.
But you don't know which whiskeys to drink.
I feel like we should know more. We need help.
I always like it's fun, kind of naturally having to be like the ambassador of Canadian whiskey. I'm such an advocate for good Canadian whiskey, because I feel like we get such a bad reputation with what gets sent across borders. The truth is, like, so if I were to talk about like two brands that I'd recommend, first one is Lot 40. Also under the same umbrella as JP Weiser. So Dr. Don Livermore, I'm not sure if you have him on Instagram or follow him. Super knowledgeable, super talented. And he's really created this like Canadian whiskey renaissance, I guess you could say. When I always joke, when I first started my Instagram page, a lot of Americans were messaging me and they were like, oh, you're in Canada. And I was like, cool. Like, do you want to be friends? Like, I'm new to this. And they were like, do you have lot 40 cask strength? And you get it from me. I was like, oh, you don't really want to be my friend. You're just like using me. And I realized how in demand it was. Like those who knew about it were like, okay, this is a solid rye. So anything lot 40, aside even from the limited releases, like, was it the dark oak, like the double oak collection that they did, you can find on shelves here, is really good. So lot 40 is well known in the US. And then the other one that I always give praise to is Alberta Distillers. So if you have seen like the Alberta cask strength rye that kind of made a buzz a couple years ago. But what's cool about that is like, it's not really official, but a lot of like American whiskey brands, Barrel, Whistle Pig, it's speculated that it comes from Alberta. So if you kind of do your homework, it's Canadian rye. That's stuff that, you know, we for the longest time can get in bottle here at Cask Strength for like $50 Canadian. And, you know, in Canadian, that's like Chuck E. Cheese money compared to, say, pounds or the euro.
Yeah, that's amazing.
There's some pride in that because it's like, we do have really great stuff, but it's just in very Canadian fashion. We'll sell it to you and you can make it cool. And then, and we'll apologize for it as well. And then the Canadian stuff that's sent there, like people people will be in the liquor store in the US and be like, is this any good? This is a Canadian whiskey. I'm like, what the hell is that? Like, I've never heard of it.
Mike, I want to know more about your process because, you know, you're super humble, but you give a lot of work in every post at Whiskey Morgue. There's, you know, reflections, not only your tasting notes on the whiskey, there's information on the film, its production, and then parallels and blending together of your passions in your post. So what is your process?
It's a chaotic mess on my notepad on my phone is what my process is. But truthfully, like, I could pull it up here. My notepad is just a series of ideas. And I always say, like, it starts in different places. So, you know, I could be watching something and it might tap into a memory of having a drink, or maybe a memory is completely like unrelated, or sometimes it starts with the whiskey itself. I think what it comes down to is, if I were to give myself some credit, it's just I like doing a ton of research. I hate half-assing anything. It might start off with like a jotted note on my notepad saying like, okay, Blair Witch Project, for instance. Okay. So I was watching Blair Witch Project recently and I was like, people talk about this as like such a highly respected movie, one of the better horror movies, but then you either get people who are like, it's a classic, or it's overhyped and it was garbage and it made me nauseous. So it's one of those two reactions. And then I was drinking Henry McKenna bourbon the other night, and I was like, this is the Blair Witch Project. Like, I posted it in my story, and my DMs was like, epic, so good, or completely overrated. I would never spend the money on that. And I was like, this is the Blair Witch Project, right? So and then I started diving into like the marketing and how did Henry McKenna become what it is now, and how did the Blair Witch kind of take off and become the film that it was, right? So sometimes I surprise myself, or it's completely unintentional. I'm putting my English degree just to some use, right? So this is what I do when I'm bored in the classroom now. I'm just over there like researching horror movies and whiskeys.
Amazing.
What's your favorite horror movie then?
I'm a big fan of, I always say Halloween, like the original Halloween. I remember the first time watching it, and just, there's always the scene where Laurie Strode's running across the street because she's going to the neighbor's house with the kids to get him inside. And he's just doing that power walk. And like the face, the mask is just so expressionless. And the fact that this, like, I'm like, that's terrifying. But this whole like expressionless blank mask, just power walking at you at his pace. Like he's like, I'm going to make it there either way. And he always somehow does catch up. But it was always the most creepy thing to me, just kind of like how subtle it was. And it always being around the idea of like him kind of being in your home and not being sure where he is. Like the whole idea of like someone invading your place of sanctuary, like your personal space.
Yes.
It's always a scary thing.
I just think that is such an iconic movie. And you mentioned nostalgia and memories earlier. I had my first kiss as a teenager whilst watching the original Halloween.
There you go. Horror movies are the perfect date night. Like, you can't go wrong.
So your dream dram, you might be familiar with this concept if you've been listening to podcasts. So what?
This is one that's like, I've actually lost sleep over this one. Even as you bring it up, like, oh, I'm nervous. Like, what am I going with?
That's why we always give heads up so people can choose. Famous person, dead or alive, who would you like to share a dram with? And which dram it would be?
Which dram? I'm going with Anthony Bourdain.
Oh,
so, yeah, I know.
Awesome.
And
so good.
When I thought about it, I was just like, who do I want to sit at a table with and converse with all night long? Like, when you watch like No Reservation, or you watch Parts Unknown, or any of those shows, what's cool is it could be the president of the United States, it could be a rock star, but everyone is just so comfortable and vulnerable when they're sitting with him at a table drinking. The next part is like, what do I drink with him? And I know in like 2012, he was at like on the layover, he tries Pappy, and he was like, if God made bourbon, it would taste like this. And I know now Pappy is a much different beast. And I've got to try one expression, so I can say, you know, I've had a taste of it. But, you know, if I'm thinking of what he loved, I would want to sit down and just do the whole flight with him. And even when we ran out of that, I feel like we could be drinking homemade moonshine after. And it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter what we're drinking, because it would still just be just as special hanging out with him, talking. And
yeah, that's a very good choice.
There was a lot of pressure going into that. I had to really think that one through.
That put you in the hot seat. It sounds like you've mentioned your wife and how she has been a big, you know, like advocate for you, like moving forward with your passions, and thank goodness she did. But do you have any inspirations for Whiskey Morgue and where this is going to lead to?
Wow, that's a really good question. So like inspirations, cool about like, if we talk about Whiskey Pals in terms of like leading to inspiration. So growing up, I would buy t-shirts from this company called Fright Rags. If I wasn't wearing my shirt, I'd be wearing a Fright Rag shirt. And I watch horror documentaries, and Ben, the owner of Fright Rags, he would be in all these documentaries because he's really respected in the community. And aside from making amazing merch, like, he knows his stuff, right? So I made a post one day, and he had released a shirt based on like the same movie. I tagged him, and he was like, "Oh, this is what you're drinking. I'm going to crack this open tonight." And I was like, "Oh, damn, he knows his stuff." Like, wait, can we be friends? Like, we're like, this is a good level here. So sure enough, like, we started chatting, and I asked to do something similar where I got to interview him. It went from interviewing him to becoming a great friend, and him and I send each other like whiskey samples all the time. And when we connect as friends, when I see how much time he puts into what he does and the passion behind it, it's truly inspiration. Just his like time and dedication to not only what he does, but like the people involved in the community. Well, I praise Ben a lot, but like in terms of inspiration, like definitely Ben from Fright Rags. And if you haven't checked out their merch and you're a horror fan, like, you need to, like, never mind me for now, go to Fright Rags, and like your favorite horror movie franchises, like, they're all on there. And Ben is just a super cool guy.
Thanks so much, Mike. So appreciate your time.
Thank you. See ya.
Thanks.
See you. Bye.
I'm Mike from Whiskey Morgue, and I am a Whisky Sisters pal.
Whisky Sisters Whisky Fact.
Last week, we featured Ardbeg and chatted a bit about their green bottles. But why do some brands use green bottles instead of clear glass?
So green bottle can prevent light ruining the quality of the liquid, and it means there is no need for chill filtering, as the liquid won't appear cloudy through the dark glass, or I guess you don't really see the color anyway. Using green bottles is also about marketing. Unfortunately, there's still this perception in Scotch whisky industry that older and darker whiskey usually means is better quality. But, you know, definitely it's not the case. And obviously, when you think about green bottles, this will help take away the assumption.
And that's funny if you think of Ardbeg and how light the colour is in so many of their whiskies, for example, the 10-year-old. So the green glass really makes sense there.
They say it's about the light, but even then, I wouldn't recommend that you keep your bottles anywhere near sunlight or daylight or, you know, any kind of light anyway. So I would say probably it all comes down to marketing.
Yeah.
You've been listening to the Whisky Sisters podcast.
Apologies again for misleading you guys and about us adding water in our whiskeys. Haha, you actually have to wait for another episode for that.
And we hope that you enjoy being our Whiskey Pals and that you liked our new segment today and that you go out and make some new Whiskey Pals yourself this week. Why not? Share a dram, spread the love.
Exactly, yeah, and go follow Mike as well and go and check him out.
Follow us on Instagram at whiskysisters.podcast, Twitter at Whiskey Sisters, and Facebook. Dust off your Facebook account at Whiskey Sisters Podcast.
May your glass be full and your dram on fire.